Boston's Human Rights Commission was established in 1984 in response to concerns over the city's racial divide, but the commission would be dormant for many years before its reactivation 2 years ago by Mayor Walsh. In response to new urgency around racial division, amplified by the pandemic, the commission's holding a virtual event tomorrow night on Black men with a focus on marginalization, trauma, and healing. To tell us about the event are one of the commissioners, Leonard Lee, and the commission's executive director, Evandro Carvalho. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I want to start with Evandro because this is a commission that we didn't hear much about for many years, actually, and it was revived a couple of years ago. So what's the focus now?
Um, First of all, I want to say thank you, Chris. It's wonderful to be back. I'm excited to be in this space as the executive director of the Boston Human Rights Commission. As you said, it was created in 1984, and it operated actually from 85 to apparently around mid 90s, and it became inactive. But until essentially January of 2019, the mayor, in his State of the Speech, Mayor Martin Walsh, in his State of the City speech, said that they will bring it back. And as you said, one of the motivations, obviously, is the world that we live in, particularly with racial divide across the country since 2016, particularly since we had President Trump come in. And another thing that President Trump has focused on is fight, if you will, against immigrants, right? So I think at that point, those are the two motivations that led the mayor to bring it back. And I was fortunate for him to call me to take on the lead on this thing. And I'm excited that, we have a dynamic group of commissioners that are involved in this thing. As you mentioned, obviously we have the infamous, or shall I say, the man at the hour, Leonard Blakely, who's present with us. Also on the commission is, and the chair of the commission is Margaret McKenna. And we have Judge Leslie Harris, who I'm sure you know from Roxbury, former judge of the Boston Municipal Court, I believe. He was certainly a juvenile justice. Robert McCarran, who's a local activist from Dorchester. Reyes Teleche, I'm sorry with her name a little bit there, but she's a professor from UMass, who also is an immigrant herself. Finally, we have Ann Russo, whom I'm sure you know as well from JP. So, and actually the last person, certainly not the least, is Ben Goldberger, who's an attorney and actually was a colleague of mine when I was a prosecutor in in Suffolk County DA's office. So we have a dynamic team of folks that, have volunteered their time over the past several months, particularly under COVID, trying as we are now to do work over Zoom, right? And some of them, I think, haven't even met each other in person, right? So the challenge certainly has been there to try to get the work off the ground.
Leonard, I know you have quite a background in public health experience working with violence prevention, trauma, and recovery. What made you want to have this panel discussion right now?
Well, I think it's really, really important now before ever. Especially, with the killings that have been going on of Black men in America, where we talk about since 16/9/2020, and now with COVID coming on and folks focusing on the injustices that have been happening to Black men, but yet we're not talking about the effects of what's happening to Black men in terms of how seeing your image being constantly murdered, marginalized, traumatized, constantly over and over, how that has an impact on being a Black male in America. Back in the 80s, there were a lot of studies being done on the destruction of Black boys within education, within social settings. And it's also talked about what was going on with Black men because of the fear people have of Black men. And it's, as you know, Chris, this dates back all the way back into slavery. And so being a commission on the Human Rights Commission, I thought it was more than appropriate to talk about what's been going on. And because a lot of people don't believe it, a lot of people don't believe the things that have been happening and how they have an impact on Black males. And so I thought this would bring a discussion up. It will talk about racism, marginalization, the trauma that Black men deal with, but also talk about how do we heal from this. Because if this was any other group of people, folks would have been flying in psychiatrists and therapists to help understand seeing your image constantly being destroyed on television, and all types of different types of medium, and books. And I think this has to become this form that we put together. Excuse me, just to talk about how do we acknowledge, how do we start to heal, and get people to understand this is not an excuse for behavior. It's just the realities of what has been going on, and that we need to really put some focus on it to develop mechanisms to help heal through the trauma that's been going on. Not to negate the trauma that Black children deal with or Black women deal with, but there's been a focused, concentrated, documented evidence of destruction of Black males in America.
You talk about things that many people have seen on TV or on social media, but people are also seeing these things in their own life, in their own neighborhoods. That leaves quite an imprint. What can they do about that?
Well, I think first and foremost, we got to treat people with dignity and respect. Secondly, not understanding that to try to say that that's who that person is. There are reasons why behaviors happen. And some of those reasons are because they're not acknowledged as being human beings. They're not acknowledged as being something of value to their community or to their society. Always looking at something as being less than.
By the way, one of the participants in the panel is I think, a psychotherapist and professor, and a lot of this is about individual actions, recovery. How will that help people?
Well, I think it's more than just individual. One of the things that's pretty upfront and personal, this affects, it's not driven by economics. It's not driven by where you live. It's driven by the color of your skin and being male. I can put a PhD in a room and someone who just got their GED in the room, and they're Black males, and they can talk about the identical pains that they've been going through and experiencing as being a Black male in America. And so for us, being able to start to heal is even bringing men into a room to say, I'm not crazy, becomes part of healing. And I give you a brief example. Robert Lewis Jr., who I've known all my life, and I experienced something in public health around some of the colleagues of mine, and said that my voice was too deep and it was very threatening. And I thought I was losing my mind. I was like, what? My voice is too deep? But as I talked to other Black men, professional Black men and Black men who are just, blue collar, and we had one thing in common. They all experienced the same thing. And for me, that was a relief for me, because it made me say I'm not crazy. And so similar things like that have happened. And by bringing Black men together and being able to share, also talks about how do we heal.
Evandro, I know Robert Lewis Jr. is going to be one of the participants in the panel, but is there anything else that people should know about who's on the panel and what they're going to be doing to help?
We have Dr. Craig Andrade, who's going to moderate the panel discussion. He is at BU. In fact, let me see if I can, he's a doctor, so he has a lot of credibility, and he's an expert in this space and works at BU currently as a professor and associate dean of practice. And so he has, I guess to some extent, we are not only bringing experts, if you will. As you mentioned, Brandon Jones is a psychotherapist and has done substantial amount of work in this space, but we also bring in folks like local folks, impactful leaders in our community like Haywood Fennell, and obviously Robert Lewis, and another Robert Lewis actually, who works for the city of Boston, who is from Boston, has had a great amount of impact, particularly relating to youth development and youth programs in the city. So we sort of, as Lee alluded to earlier, we wanted to sort of put it in perspective to sort of say, and even for me, as to some extent a professional Black man, who's an attorney, and to kind of listen to Brandon Jones and listen to Dr. Andrade and say, oh, okay, I see what's going on there. You don't always sort of know the space, particularly your trauma that you're going through, or how you heal, right, as a Black man, right? And you don't even realize, to an extent, that, as Lee alluded to earlier, again, that other people are having similar experiences. I can tell you, even in having smaller meetings with Lee and Judge Leslie, to hear Judge Leslie, the impeccable Judge Leslie, talk about his struggles, it just gives credit to say, listen, okay, I'm not alone in this space, right? So I think we have a dynamic group of experts and local leaders that can talk about not only professional sort of academic stuff about what's going on and go over the history, but also personal history. I mean, I know you know Haywood Fennell and what he brings to the table, right? In terms of his story as a veteran, as a man that's been in prison, as a man that's dealt with addiction, who's still in the community today at his age pushing, right? And I've been in this space with him, and certainly, actually, I've been on this show, right? And you could just feel the presence that Haywood brings, right? That just the fight, and I think that's partly what we're trying to accomplish here. It's just to say, you're not alone. Let's see what we can do together. Let's kind of at least bring perspective beyond just it's the individual, it's me that's struggling with this one thing, right?
Going back to your background as a prosecutor, you had to deal with people who were traumatized. What did you learn about the importance of listening to them?
It takes me back to those Roxbury days, man. There was so much going on in our community, and to be honest, that's one of the key reasons why I ended up running for state rep. For a young man who went to Madison Park High School and to come back and be, obviously went to university, went to Howard Law in DC, and came back and look at some of my close friends, right, that I knew before, and they have 7-page records, right, and their mentality and how they explain things is way different than mine, right? And they see me and they approach me with that load, if you will, of things, even though when you look at their record, you would just say a bad guy, if you will, right? Because sometimes it's often violence, it's guns, as unfortunately we're still dealing with. In fact, the murder rate in the city, unfortunately, is I believe at least 50% higher than normal right now. So those sort of things, people are walking around with them, right? And when you meet someone and they're talking about an experience that you can't relate to, but you can understand the trauma, you can kind of start feeling the trauma. I think it's important for certainly for me as an individual, the growth that I had there as a prosecutor, and certainly what I'm having now is key to this event.
Finally, we had just a little time, Evandro,
Sure,
but
sure.
if people want to plug into this panel discussion, is there some place that they can go to that's connected with the commission, maybe, where they can find information about that?
Yes, I mean, one thing that people can certainly do is Google the commission, and it'll be we have a website on the city's main website. But the key thing, I think we should have the flyer, is through Zoom, right? So in fact, I certainly have it. Sorry to cut you off. I certainly have it on my page. I know Lee has it, Judge has it on their Facebook page. So the word is out.
Great. Well, thank you both very much, gentlemen, for sharing that information. That was Leonard Lee and Evandro Carvalho from the Boston Human Rights Commission. We'll have more news in just a moment.